February 14th, 1943, Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. Obergefreiter Klaus Müller crouched behind a low stone wall as American infantrymen advanced across the rocky terrain 300 yards ahead. He'd been in combat for 3 years. Poland, France, Russia. He'd seen fear in enemy eyes before. This felt different. His carabiner 98K felt suddenly inadequate in his hands. The bolt action that had served him faithfully through a dozen engagements now seemed slow, heavy, outdated. The Americans weren't rushing forward in the panicked waves he'd seen from French conscripts or the desperate charges of Soviet penal battalions. These GIs moved deliberately, firing as they advanced. Not the sporadic crack, crack, crack of bolt actions being cycled between shots. A continuous rolling thunder that never seemed to stop. 8 rounds. That's what intelligence had said. The American M1 rifle held 8 rounds and fired them as fast as a man could pull the trigger. Müller had dismissed it as propaganda. Now he was hearing it firsthand. He rose, aimed at a crouching American rifleman, fired. The 7.92mm round kicked against his shoulder. He worked the bolt, up, back, forward, down, chambering a fresh cartridge. 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, the American fired 3 times. Müller's squad mate to his left jerked backward, hit. Another German went down 15 meters away. The volume of fire was impossible. There couldn't be that many Americans. But the 8-round clips emptying in 5 seconds, then a fresh clip slammed home in 2 more seconds, created a firepower density that made the advancing Americans seem like twice their actual number. Then Müller understood. His commander had been right back in Tunis when he'd examined a captured M1. This changes everything. What German infantrymen would learn over the next 2 years would reshape how they fought, and ultimately, how they lost the war. For nearly 4 decades, the bolt-action rifle had dominated military thinking. Since 1898, the Mauser 98 system, refined into the Wehrmacht's Karabiner 98K, represented the pinnacle of infantry rifle design, accurate out to 500 meters, reliable in any conditions, simple enough for a conscript to master in weeks. The Kar 98K chambered the powerful 7.92 657mm Mauser cartridge, delivering 2,493 feet per second muzzle velocity with devastating terminal ballistics. Its 5-round internal magazine fed smoothly through stripper clips. A well-trained German infantryman could deliver 10 to 15 aim shots per minute. This had been sufficient for the Wehrmacht's tactical doctrine, which centered firepower around the squad's MG-34 or MG-42 machine gun. The rifle was a supporting weapon. The machine gun killed. The rifleman maneuverito and protected the gunner. Then, in 1943, German forces in North Africa began encountering something that didn't fit their tactical assumptions. The M1 Garand, adopted by the United States Army in 1936, represented a revolutionary departure from military orthodoxy. Chambered in 30-06 Springfield, ballistically nearly identical to the German 7.92mm round, the M1 was the world's first standard-issue semi-automatic infantry rifle. Gas-operated through a rotating bolt, it fired every time the trigger was pulled until its 8-round in-block clip ran empty. The statistics were stark. An M1-equipped American rifleman could deliver 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute, 3 to 4 times faster than a German with a Kar 98K. The practical combat rate was closer to 30 rounds per minute under fire, but even this represented a crushing advantage. What made this difference devastating wasn't just speed. It was sustained fire. A bolt-action rifleman had to break his sight picture after every shot, work the action, reacquire the target. The semi-automatic Garand operator stayed in the fight continuously, the recoil cycle automatically chambering the next round while the shooter maintained his aim. German officers studying captured M1s in Tunisia were impressed by the weapon's quality. Machining tolerances were excellent. The gas system proved reliable even in desert conditions. Weight was 9.5 pounds loaded, comparable to the 9-pound Kar 98K. Effective range was listed at 500 yards, identical to German doctrine. But integration into Wehrmacht tactics would have required a complete restructuring of infantry doctrine and logistics. The Kar 98K had already been manufactured in quantities exceeding 14 million rifles. Retooling for a semi-automatic would have cost precious manufacturing capacity better spent on machine guns, anti-tank weapons, and artillery. More critically, Germany's ammunition production capacity was strained. A semi-automatic rifle quintupled ammunition consumption per man. German logistics, already stretched across 2,000 miles of front in Russia and increasingly interdicted by Allied bombing, couldn't support it. The Germans did field the Gewehr 43 semi-automatic in limited numbers starting in 1943, roughly 400,000 compared to over 5.4 million M1 Garands produced by war's end. But the G43 never became standard issue. The average German infantryman carried a Kar 98K from 1939 to 1945. The American rifle gives their infantry squad the continuous fire of a light machine gun, one German after-action report from Normandy noted. Combined with their actual machine guns and the volume of artillery support, they achieve fire superiority with fewer men than our doctrine assumes necessary. The mathematics were brutal. An American infantry squad with 8 M1 Garands could theoretically deliver 320 rounds per minute of sustained semi-automatic fire before even considering their Browning automatic rifle or machine guns. A German squad with 8 Kar 98Ks delivered 80 to 120 rounds per minute of bolt-action fire. This 3-to-1 firepower advantage meant that man for man, an American rifle squad outgunned a German rifle squad before reinforcements or support weapons entered the equation. The implications for offensive operations were profound. For defensive operations, they were catastrophic. What German soldiers would experience in Normandy, the Bulge, and across Germany itself would prove that Lieutenant General George S. Patton's assessment was accurate when he called the M1 the greatest battle implement ever devised. But in early 1943, most German soldiers still hadn't faced it in sustained combat. That was about to change. In February 1943, General Feldmarschall Erwin Rommel reviewed intelligence assessments on American equipment captured at Kasserine Pass. His forces had inflicted a sharp tactical defeat on the Green US-22 Corps, validating German assumptions about American fighting quality. The reports were dismissive. American tanks were inferior to German armor. American tactical coordination was poor. American commanders showed inexperience. Even American weapons drew condescension. One German intelligence summary described the M1 Garand as suitable for a nation of farmers and hunters. Semi-automatic fire sacrifices the precision and range necessary for military combat. The assessment reflected a worldview shaped by different tactical traditions. German marksmen prized the Kar 98K's accuracy at extended range. The disciplined volleys of controlled bolt-action fire represented proper infantry combat. Semi-automatic fire seemed wasteful, undisciplined. The product of a wealthy nation that could afford to spray ammunition rather than conserve it for carefully aimed shots. What German observers failed to grasp was that the Americans weren't sacrificing precision. The M1's gas-operated action absorbed recoil efficiently. The rifle's weight and balance promoted instinctive pointing, and critically, staying on target through multiple shots beat reacquiring the target after working a bolt. The Americans were building their infantry tactics around a different philosophy: suppression through volume. Keep the enemy's head down with continuous fire while maneuver elements advanced. The M1 made every rifleman a base of fire. German doctrine still centered on the machine gun as the primary killing weapon. The riflemen existed to protect and support the MG team. This worked brilliantly when German forces held the initiative, when they could position their machine guns to enfilade advancing enemies. But by 1943, the Wehrmacht was increasingly fighting defensive battles, and in defense, the continuous semi-automatic fire of M1-equipped infantry suppressed German positions more effectively than bolt-action fire could answer. The Germans couldn't move, couldn't maneuver, couldn't bring their tactical superiority to bear. Meanwhile, American production continued accelerating. Springfield Armory and Winchester together manufactured 5.4 million M1 Garands between 1936 and 1945. Every American infantry division fielded 7,100 M1s. Every replacement battalion brought more. The stream never stopped. Germany's industrial base, even before Allied bombing intensified, couldn't match this output. The Kar-98K remained in production because retooling was impossible. The Gewehr 43 semi-automatic entered service in 1943 but never exceeded 400,000 units. For every one German semi-automatic rifle, the Americans fielded 13. German soldiers began recognizing the distinctive ping sound when an M1's en-bloc clip ejected after the 8th round. Some learned to time attacks during those 2-second reloading intervals, but American tactics evolved to have squad members reload in sequence, maintaining continuous fire. The Americans don't shoot like soldiers. One German veteran of the Eastern Front wrote home in late 1943. They shoot like they're emptying buckets. We can't answer that volume of fire. We hear 8 shots before we've fired 3. The Wehrmacht was learning an uncomfortable lesson. Superior training and tactical doctrine couldn't overcome a 3-to-1 firepower disadvantage at the squad level. Not consistently, not sustainably, and nowhere would this lesson be hammered home more violently than on the beaches of Normandy. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what you know about the M1 Garand's impact on infantry tactics. Drop a comment below and let me know if you'd heard about German soldiers' reactions to semi-automatic fire before, and if you're enjoying these deep dives into World War II infantry weapons history, hit that subscribe button. These stories take serious research to get the details right, and knowing you're out there makes it all worthwhile. June 6, 1944, 06:45 hours, Omaha Beach, Normandy. The first American troops to cross the seawall at Dog Green sector carried M1 Garands slick with seawater and coated with sand. Half the men in the first wave were casualties, but the survivors who made it off the beach brought something German defenders in the WN-62 strongpoint had never faced in such concentrated numbers: sustained semi-automatic fire from infantry advancing under artillery support. Oberleutnant Bernhard Furking commanded the concrete bunker complex overlooking the beach. His men had slaughtered Americans in the water with MG-42 fire. The machine guns rattled at 1/200 rounds per minute, tearing through landing craft and bodies with mechanical efficiency. But the Americans who reached cover didn't take defensive positions. They advanced, under fire, with suppression that Furking's veterans found unnerving. The volume of incoming rifle fire was constant. His grenadiers couldn't maneuver, couldn't reposition. Every time a man moved, American rounds snapped past. Not the occasional shot from a bolt-action rifleman finding his range, a storm of lead that never paused. An American rifle squad, 12 men with 10 M1 Garands and 1 Browning automatic rifle, was putting out sustained firepower that Furking's 2 MG-42 positions could match but not exceed. And the Americans had dozens of squads, each one a self-contained base of fire. The M1's 8-round capacity meant American soldiers fired, reloaded in seconds with a fresh clip, and continued firing in an almost seamless stream. German defenders working Kar-98K bolts managed 1 shot to every 3 incoming rounds. The mathematics of suppression worked decisively against them. Private First Class Robert Sales from the 116th Infantry Regiment made it to the base of the bluff at 0730 hours. His M1 had functioned perfectly despite full immersion in seawater. He'd fired 32 rounds crossing 200 yards of beach, changing clips 4 times while moving. A German with a Kar 98K would have fired perhaps 8 rounds in the same time and distance. Sales took position behind a destroyed tank obstacle. Above him, German positions continued firing. But the volume of American rifle fire was building to a crescendo as more troops crossed the beach and added their M1s to the fire plan. The defensive positions that had seemed impregnable at H hour were being suppressed by small arms fire alone, something German doctrine hadn't accounted for. The continuous crack of 30-06 rounds created psychological pressure beyond their physical danger. German soldiers described it in after-action reports and prisoner interrogations. The sound never stopped. The Americans seemed to have unlimited ammunition. The instinct was to keep your head down, but keeping your head down meant you couldn't fight back. At 0815 hours, Sales' platoon began moving up the bluff. The advance was methodical. 4 men fired while 4 moved. Then the roles reversed. The M1 made this fire and movement drill devastatingly effective. Every advancing rifleman could lay down suppressive fire without needing to cycle a bolt. Every stationary rifleman could engage targets continuously while his comrades moved. Firking's bunker complex fell at 01940 hours. The Americans didn't overwhelm it with numbers. They smothered it with continuous fire until engineers could maneuver close enough to use satchel charges. The Kar 98K equipped grenadiers couldn't maintain fire volume sufficient to stop the crawling advance. Similar actions repeated across Normandy through June and July. German veterans of the Eastern Front found the Western Front qualitatively different. Soviet infantry had been numerous, but their rifles, primarily bolt-action Mosin Nagants with some SVT-40 semi-automatics, generated firepower they knew how to counter. American infantry was different. Fewer men, better armed. Supported by overwhelming artillery and air power, yes, but even at the small unit level, the firepower density was shocking. A German squad typically fielded 8 riflemen with Kar 98Ks and 1 2-man MG-42 team. Call it 120 rounds per minute from the rifles, plus 1,200 rounds per minute from the machine gun when ammunition supply permitted sustained fire. An American rifle squad fielded 8 men with M1 Garands, 2 men with M1 carbines, 1 man with a Browning automatic rifle, and 1 man with an M19903 Springfield, the Scout. That was 320 rounds per minute from the Garands, 80 from the carbines, 600 from the bar in the assault role. Before the machine gun. The Americans weren't better shots individually. German marksmanship training was superior, but marksmanship mattered less when the Americans could put 3 bullets downrange for every German one. Someone would hit something. By August 1944, German tactical manuals were being revised to address the firepower imbalance. Recommendations included increased use of automatic weapons, emphasis on immediate counterattack before Americans could establish fire superiority, and avoidance of firefights at ranges under 300 meters where American volume of fire overwhelmed German accuracy. None of it worked consistently. The M1 Garand had tilted the tactical balance at the infantry squad level decisively toward the Americans. Not overwhelmingly, German tactical skill, defensive positions, and operational experience still mattered. But the margin was gone. The Wehrmacht could no longer count on superior performance from equivalent forces. Oberleutnant Frerking survived Omaha Beach and was captured near Cherbourg on June 24th. During interrogation, he was asked about the most surprising aspect of combat with Americans. His answer entered the intelligence summary. Their rifle, Everyone shoots like a machine gun. We couldn't believe they were riflemen. We thought every American was a machine gunner. It changes how you fight when the enemy never stops shooting. The M1 Garand hadn't won the war alone, but it had removed one of Germany's most reliable advantages: superior tactical performance at the small unit level. Everything else followed from that. Technical analysis of the M1 Garand captured throughout 1943 and 1944 gave German ordnance experts a clear picture of why the weapon worked so effectively. The reports made uncomfortable reading for commanders still relying on Kar 98K equipped infantry. The M1's gas-operated system proved remarkably reliable. A small port 8 inches from the muzzle bled off expanding gas as the bullet passed. This gas drove a piston that cycled the action, extracting the spent case, cocking the hammer, feeding a fresh round from the 8-round en-bloc clip. The cycle took 0.04 seconds. The shooter's finger was the limiting factor, not the mechanism. Recoil was manageable. The M1's 9.5-pound weight and effective recoil spring meant the 30-06 Springfield cartridge, generating 2,800 feet per second muzzle velocity, didn't punish the shooter excessively. Follow-up shots were faster than with any bolt action. The in-block clip system drew criticism from some German engineers. The clip fed into the action from the top, making the rifle difficult to load while prone. The distinctive ping when the empty clip ejected revealed when a soldier needed to reload. But these were minor drawbacks compared to the sustained fire rate advantage. Range and accuracy matched the Kar 98K. The M1's peep sights were faster to acquire than the Kar 98K's notch and post, particularly in low light. Maximum effective range was listed at 500 yards for both rifles. In practice, most infantry combat occurred inside 300 yards, where the M1's rapid fire mattered more than minute of angle precision at distance. Intelligence officers distributed bulletins throughout the Wehrmacht describing American tactics built around the M1's capabilities. American infantry doctrine emphasized fire superiority at the squad level. Every rifleman was expected to pour fire into enemy positions to enable maneuver. The M1 made this doctrine practical. The psychological impact exceeded the physical. German soldiers reported that continuous semi-automatic fire created stress disproportionate to actual casualties inflicted. The sound of constant incoming fire, even if most rounds missed, suppressed aggressive tactics. Men hesitated. Maneuver slowed. Initiative died. This was exactly the opposite effect of German MG-42 fire on Allied troops. The machine gun's high cyclic rate was terrifying, but came from fixed positions that could be avoided or suppressed. The M1's distributed firepower across the squad meant Americans could shoot at you from everywhere simultaneously. By 1945, some German units equipped with captured M1 Garands preferred them to their own rifles. Not because of better ballistics or superior engineering, but because the psychological comfort of matching American firepower was worth the logistics headache of supplying 30-06 ammunition. Post-war assessments by military historians calculated that the M1 Garand increased American infantry effectiveness by approximately 25% compared to hypothetical bolt-action-equipped units in the same tactical situations. This didn't account for psychological factors or the tactical flexibility semi-automatic fire enabled. The British, who had rejected semi-automatic rifle development before the war, accelerated research on the EM2 after observing the M1's effectiveness. The Soviets, who had fielded the SVT-40 semi-automatic in limited numbers, regretted not making it standard issue. Every major military power studied the M1 as the template for future infantry rifles. What the Germans learned, too late to implement, was that future infantry combat would be decided by sustained firepower at the squad level. The era of the bolt action as a primary military weapon ended on the beaches of Normandy and in the hedgerows of France. The M1 Garand wrote the epitaph. One captured German officer, asked in 1945 what single American weapon caused the most concern, gave an answer that would have seemed absurd in 1939. The rifle. They all have automatic rifles. That's why we lost the small battles. And the small battles decide wars. The rifle that German intelligence initially dismissed as a farmer's weapon had systematically dismantled Wehrmacht tactical assumptions from North Africa to the Rhine. The M1 Garand served as America's standard infantry rifle from 1936 to 1957. Over 5.4 million were manufactured by Springfield Armory in Winchester. The rifle saw combat in World War II, Korea, and limited service in early Vietnam before the M14 replaced it. Combat effectiveness statistics from World War II painted a clear picture. American infantry units consistently achieved fire superiority against equivalent-sized German forces. When variables like artillery support, air power, and tactical position were controlled for, the M1-equipped Americans delivered approximately 2.5 to 3 times more small arms fire per minute than Kar 98K-equipped Germans. This firepower advantage translated into lower American casualties in offensive operations. Not dramatically lower, but measurably so. Studies conducted by the U.S. Army's Operations Research Office in the 1950s estimated that semi-automatic rifles reduced casualties by 15–20% in assault operations compared to bolt actions, primarily by suppressing defensive fire more effectively. The weapon's reliability record was exceptional. Fewer than 1% of M1 Garands issued experienced catastrophic failures requiring armorer-level repair. The rifle functioned in desert heat, Arctic cold, Pacific humidity, and European mud. Soldiers reported that basic field maintenance, cleaning and lubrication, kept the weapon operational under conditions that would have disabled more complex designs. General George S. Patton's famous assessment that the M1 was the greatest battle implement ever devised appeared in a letter to Springfield Armory dated January 26, 1945. While hyperbolic, Patton's judgment reflected operational reality. The M1 gave American infantry a tangible advantage that no amount of German tactical skill could fully overcome. Post-war military doctrine across NATO and Warsaw Pact nations embraced semi-automatic and select-fire rifles as standard. The British EM-2, the Soviet AK-47, the Belgian FAL, the German G3 all traced their doctrinal lineage to the M1's demonstrated effectiveness. The bolt-action rifle survived only as a specialized weapon for snipers and ceremonial units. The Korean War validated the M1's design in a new theater. In bitter cold that froze weapons, and in the rapid close-quarters fighting of Chinese human wave attacks, the M1's semi-automatic fire proved decisive. American troops could deliver continuous fire into massed assaults, something bolt actions couldn't sustain. Several nations adopted the M1 post-war. Italy manufactured licensed copies. Denmark, Norway, Greece, and Turkey received M1s through military aid. The rifle's reputation attracted customers beyond the original American inventory. By 1960, the M1's fundamental design, a gas-operated, semi-automatic rifle firing a full-power rifle cartridge, was considered obsolete. Intermediate cartridges and select fire capability had moved beyond the M1's capabilities. The M14, essentially an M1 modified for 7.62mm NATO with a 20-round magazine and select fire, replaced it, but the M1's legacy persisted. Modern military rifle design traces a direct line from the Garand's gas-operated rotating bolt system. The M16, AK-47, and their descendants all employ variations of the operating principles John Garand pioneered. More fundamentally, the M1 established the modern concept of infantry firepower. Every rifleman a source of continuous suppressive fire, every squad a self-contained fire base, every unit built around sustained shooting rather than massed volleys. The Germans learned this lesson by receiving it on battlefields from Tunisia to Berlin. By then, learning came too late. The story of the M1 Garand reveals a fundamental truth about military innovation. Tactical assumptions die harder than the soldiers holding outdated weapons. German military theorists correctly identified that their MG-42-centered squad doctrine was superior to American rifle-centered tactics, if both sides used bolt actions. They were solving yesterday's problem. The M1 Garand changed the equation. Suddenly, American squads didn't need to wait for machine gun support to establish fire superiority. Every rifleman contributed continuous suppression. The Wehrmacht's response revealed the institutional inflexibility that doomed it. Unable to retool for semi-automatic production without sacrificing other priorities, unwilling to restructure squad tactics around American firepower principles, German forces fought 1944 and 1945 with 1939's weapons and 1918's doctrine. The results were predictable. Technology alone doesn't win wars, but the right technology in sufficient quantities, wielded by adequately trained soldiers, shifts the odds decisively. The M1 Garand was right. The Americans had millions, and their soldiers learned quickly to exploit the advantage. One en-bloc clip at a time, one 8-round burst of semi-automatic fire at a time, the farmer's rifle that German intelligence dismissed proved Patton's assessment accurate. Not because it was the perfect weapon, no weapon is, but because it gave the average American infantryman a concrete advantage that changed how small unit combat was fought. Sometimes the greatest battle implement ever devised is simply the weapon that lets your soldiers shoot more effectively than the enemy can shoot back. Superior firepower trumps superior training when the margin reaches 3-1. If you found this story as fascinating as I did researching it, I'd appreciate if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are dozens more untold stories from World War II that deserve to be remembered, and I'll be bringing you a new one every week. What should I cover next? Let me know in the comments below.